Excuse me. So, Carol Ramsey, you're the costume designer of the ABC miniseries When We Rise, which seeks to do no less than recount the entire history of the gay rights movement in America. For you, this represents decades worth of costume work that you have to do. So, how do you start with that?
It was 4 decades of costume work, going from 1972 till what we called present day, which was really 2013. And it really just begins with a lot of research. It begins with the script, reading the script and really talking a lot with Lance Black and Gus Van Sant for the 1972 episode, which was the first 2 hours. And as we go along, really working closely with each of the different directors and Lance to really decide, and Bill Groom, the production designer, to decide what the look should be. And really the overall consensus was that we wanted it to be very realistic and true to the period, really on point for period, and faithful to the characters that we were portraying. So what that really means then is research, research, research. And it's one of the most fun things about doing a project, is really diving into that world. I was lucky, the first 2 hours was all 1972 San Francisco, and I happened to be in San Francisco in 1972 playing music on the street with my friends. So I really knew that era and knew the period, and I knew what people were wearing, what was cool, what wasn't, what older people were wearing. I mean, it was a great, I think, leg up I had a little bit. But one thing about costume design and doing research, even if you've lived the period, you really still need to do research, because it's amazing what you don't remember, and you're maybe recreating a part of that era that you weren't really intimately a part of. You have to really, we create a world. So you have to do research that's really pointed and curated to bring that particular world that you're portraying onto some kind of research board, so that you can communicate it to the studio, Lance, the director, and your crew. So it really is all about research.
Now, you're also dealing with real people who were working as consultants on the show: Cleve Jones, Ken Jones, Roma Guy, some others. How much did that influence your work? Were you able to speak with them at all about what kind of costumes, what kind of clothing they wore?
Yes, I spoke with them a lot. Probably the third day on the job, I got on a plane and went from LA to San Francisco, and I met with Cleve and Ken Jones and Roma Guy in a really beautiful coffee shop in the Castro, right under a picture of Cleve Jones and with Harvey Milk in the 70s, which was kind of amazing. They were just such a great resource. I mean, I really talked to all of them. I mean, all four of them were such an important part. And also Gilbert Baker, who shows up later in the series, partway through. I mean, we really had long conversations, and I even had Dionne Jones sent me her real scrubs that she wore as a nurse in the AIDS ward in San Francisco General Hospital in the 80s. And we had just really, really great, they gave us a lot of personal photos. And so they were a huge part of helping to develop the look. Also, Annie, the daughter of Dionne Jones, she was really helpful for her character when we got into the 90s. I mean, it was really a big, big help.
Could you talk a little more about charting the change of fashion throughout those decades, and in particular, doing it in such a way that reflects the characters?
Mm-hmm. Well, the 70s look for this society that we were showing was really the people were first and foremost activists, and they political activists, and they came out of the anti-war movement, a lot of them, and so people had, I mean, if anyone remembers that look, it was very street. It was not fashion. It was not high fashion. A lot of army jackets, scarves, jeans all the time, hiking boots. I mean, it was sort of, it vacillated between being sort of drab and then very colorful with, it had moved then beyond to the tie-dye and that sort of thing of the 60s. It was a little more bohemian, but it was a very street look, and especially, like I say, the world that we were portraying was not at all high fashion. Then we move into the second 2 hours is starts in 77 and goes to about 81, right when AIDS started to rear its ugly head and nobody knew what it was. So then we're getting into the running shoes and the track suits and a kind of a slimmer look, narrower jeans, but it's still very street, and it's very, you know, a lot of these kids were living in flop houses. They didn't have a lot of money. And so we wanted to really, you know, we aged a lot of things. We didn't want anything to look really new because that was being faithful to the look of this world. Then we get into, and so with Deion Jones coming in, and the whole AIDS crisis starting, we had a lot of hospital looks, and so that kind of blew the look open to this whole other world, which was clean and sterile and a lot of medical looks, and that was a really kind of jarring new look for the film, and I think that was psychologically really great for what was happening in the culture. Then the next episodes were in the 90s. The third and fourth hour, or 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth and sixth hour were in the 90s, and just really reflecting the difference in clothes. At this point now, our characters have grown up a lot, and now they're having jobs and they're getting involved in city hall and politics, and so they're really progressing into sort of a little bit more of a, you know, a business look. But it's really within the 90s, you know, that was the era of power suits for politicians, and, you know, so our characters had sort of versions of this, the ones that had to go to city hall and present themselves that way. Then we get into the last 2 episodes were contemporary, and that was the whole Proposition 8, and that was very political. A lot of it's much more upscale in that period, with a lot of very politically active people that worked in Washington, had money. It was just a more powerful set of people politically, and so it really became a much more sort of suit kind of look. And so it really had quite a few different looks.
You mentioned working with Bill Grimm, the production designer. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about the way that you two created a specific look for this film in terms of color and texture, what you were going for emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, the overriding concern was to make it really very real. That meant a lot of aging, not a lot of bright colors except when needed, more of a punctuation, but an overall sort of patina of things being used and worn, and just down in general, except for maybe the last episodes where we had to really show those people being, again, more upscale. But Bill and I we talked a lot about it with Lance. We used our research pictures. He's the other research king. I mean, I'm the research queen and he's the research king, I think. And we traded a lot of research. We used those visuals as a jumping off point, because it's one thing to talk about something, but it's really another thing is just get out the pictures and start looking at them, and then you react to that. And that's a really great tool because you can be more specific. Like, we like this, we don't like this, this isn't really quite right. So we really did rely on the research a lot to craft the look. But again, I guess the whole thing is just needed to be very realistic.
It's also a hugely ambitious project. I mean, I think if you take away all the commercials, you have about 6 total hours that you're designing costumes for. So talk a little bit about the practicality of it, making multiples and all the other kind of work you had to do for dressing extras. What was some of the nuts and bolts work that had to go into it?
Well, the sheer volume was staggering. I'd say we averaged for principal characters, for every 2 hours, we block shot it in 2-hour chunks, and I would say we average between 80 and 100 principal characters for each 2-hour chunk, which is a lot for television. And a lot of the really numbers 1 through 5 in the call sheets were averaging, 20 to maybe sometimes 30 costume changes per episode, which is a lot, especially for TV. There were a lot of story days that we had to go through within an episode. And then on top of that, we were averaging about 1,200 extras dressed head to toe for every 2 hours of show. Again, that's a lot because we're really controlling the whole look. No one goes on camera without coming in for a fitting. We get the sizes. We pull a rack of clothes for them. They come in, we do fittings, we do alterations. So just the sheer volume was pretty big. We had in Vancouver where we shot, we had a permanent crew of about 20 people. And in LA, we had a permanent crew of 5 people that just pulled clothes and shipped to us nonstop. So it was a real, it's the nuts and bolts. Was we just had a permanent crew of 5 people in Vancouver, just every day, all day, just doing fittings with extras. And then my 2 assistant designers and I just did fittings. We did all the principal fittings. And then a few people, I had the people in LA did a few fittings with people in Los Angeles who couldn't come as soon as we needed them. So that was that was a help. But it was really for them, it was about shipping stuff to us as we needed it, and then shipping things back, and they would, get the stuff back to the costume rental houses that we're renting from when we were done with a particular era. But the real challenge was in the middle of right in the middle of shooting. We shut down in Vancouver, went to San Francisco, and we changed all the top 4 actors changed from the younger version to the older versions, and so we had to establish a whole new look for the second set of actors, at the same time being out of our department, out of where all our stock was. We had to ship everything to San Francisco. We had riot scenes. It was, and then we started right back up 2 days later in Vancouver on the next episode. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges of my career, I think.
Say the least. Throughout the course of this, you're working with Gus Van Sant, Dustin Lance Black, Dee Reese, and Thomas Schlamme. What were those collaborations like? What did each of those directors bring to their episodes that helped you with your work?
Oh, that's a good question. They were also different, and really, I just really loved working with every one of them. Gus he's very quiet. He has a really intense vision. He likes to sort of, I don't want to say make things up as he goes along on the set, but often things, and I don't blame him, once you get to the set and you finally see what the set looks like and you're really there, a lot of times that's your final canvas, and you want to sort of bring out your box of paints and paint more in as you're, the morning of the shooting. And, that can be really nerve-wracking for all of us who, have sort of prepared something. But I enjoy that, and he's really kind of visionary because he's willing to work that way. And he comes up with great ideas. It's really a lot of times out of the box, and he's really reacting to the tools that he's been given. So that's what he's very unique in that way. And he's less conventional in his approach. I don't know how else to describe it. But again, that's exciting, I think. And it's really like really interesting filmmaking. Dee Reese brought a really great perspective, being an African-American lesbian director. Very rare to find somebody like that. And I think she really brought a great social perspective and a woman's angle to those 2 episodes, and I found that really great. Tommy Schlamme is a total pro. He's been, he was very, very experienced TV director, and again, he has a very intense vision. He really, really knows what he wants, and he has a really great shorthand. He's very concise, and he knows how to he knows how to compromise if he has to without sacrificing quality. And it was really great to watch him just sort of be like a sharp knife cutting through you know, the chaos on set and like really getting what he wanted. It was really an amazing experience to work with him. And Lance, of course, as the creator of the show, just had it all in his head. I mean, he's a very kind person. He listens to you, and he really just brought the full force of his experience in this whole subject. And especially to those last 2 episodes, and especially those last 2 episodes was his era. I mean, he lived Proposition 8 and lived through, I mean, he participated in all the court cases and taking that whole case to the Supreme Court. So to have someone that was there that actually did it, directed, was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the ways in which your work really complements performance and helps bring out character.
That's a good question. For the actors, I mean, costume is kind of the first department they encounter. When an actor comes to the set, they've sort of come off with their agents, all the negotiations and all the nuts and bolts and, you know, that kind of thing. And so they come in, and I really feel, first off, it's my job to really make the actor feel comfortable and to welcome him or her to the show and make them see that we're going to really take care of them. And we start, and often where they've just maybe come off another show and they're still sort of in that head. And so it's really, I really take on the responsibility of really talking about the character and letting them for the first time kind of put a toe into the water of becoming that person, because we're really turning that person, that actor, into somebody else. Some of the actors, like I say, have thought about it a lot. Some of them are just all of a sudden they're there and they haven't thought about it that much. So I really try and start presenting ideas to them visually through the clothing. And it's really one of the most exciting things is in a fitting is to see an actor put on clothing and stand in front of the mirror, and you see them sort of try different things out, try different personas out. Will this work? If I have this, how do I feel? How would I manipulate this costume? And you see them start becoming other people, and that's really cool.
You know, we haven't seen too many stories about the gay rights movement, particularly on this scale. We've certainly seen stories before, but not that many. As people continue to discover the show, what do you hope they take away from it?
Well, I guess really for me the most important thing is that people learn to think about inclusion and making our society accept, you know, every possible person from all walks of life, your religion, your sexual orientation, your gender, and to really explode the idea of, I think one thing that's happening right now is exploding the idea of gender, and it's becoming less and less rigid. I think people of my generation are just starting to maybe understand this a little bit. I think kids that are 18, 19, 20 are really pushing that forward. And so I think it was really courageous of ABC to take that on and sort of show that that's starting to really happen. I just think about in the last just 5 or 6 years how that whole idea of rigid gender lines has just kind of broken apart. It's very fascinating. So I love that it's helping with that. But just on the bigger scale, the idea that we need to care for each other and that we are a society of all sorts of people, of beliefs, and our whole country is really based on the idea of inclusion. And I think that's really the big point of this show, because as Lance always says, it's not just about gay rights. It's, you know, the Roma guy and Cleve and all our characters really, not only are they working for gay rights, but they're working for, you know, healthcare and immigration and really just the recognition of the underdog.
Well, Carol, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work. It's an exceptional program, and thank you for taking the time to chat. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Okay.